Well, after many months, Powerless is finally premiered, but is a much different show than expected. Hey guys, here are the series premiere of the highly anticipated new NBC comedy Powerless. This is Season 1, Episode 1, Win or Lose, and I was definitely very much looking forward to this show for a couple of reasons. One, because yes, I do love the superhero genre, though I do feel we're very oversaturated right now. There are so many different properties, trying to get superhero stuff on their network because they know it'll give them money and, fans and things like that, and they do everything they can to try to make their network more popular. I mean, Hulu is now doing a Marvel show. I mean, there's just way too much of it. But the thing about this show is that there is not really a half-hour comedy, and not quite in the way that this show was done. The original concept of the show very much intrigued me. But, however, Powerless is completely different of a show than I thought it really was going to be. And I'm not going to lie, it kind of disappointed me a bit. I was expecting a lot more from the show. And that's mainly because of what it's really undergone, which is not necessarily anyone's fault. Basically, the original concept of the show, if you guys didn't know, is that after, because I'm going to explain the original concept, and I'm going to explain the new concept, and basically the concept of the show is after all of our superheroes partake in many fights with the supervillains, these are the people responsible for cleaning up the streets. They were basically insurance agents who were doing it not because, they obviously want to make a living for themselves, but, they were all very close coworkers who really just wanted to genuinely help people, and we would kind of see them get mad at the superheroes and deal with problems regarding, superheroes and things like that. So that could have been a very fun show. That's one of the reasons why I was very much looking forward to it. However, if you guys don't know, the head writer actually left this show immediately after, actually, I don't know if it's immediately, but not long after the Comic-Con, the Comic-Con premiere of the show happened back in, Comic-Con happened. The writer ended up leaving the show, and they completely redid the entire show, which is not nearly as good as what it could have been. Now what the show is about is, yes, we do have a bunch of mundanes living in a world with superheroes, but now they work at Wayne Enterprise, basically, that specialize in products for ordinary humans who basically are victims of the battles between superheroes and supervillains, basically, I guess, to shield them and, to make the right kind of tech. And basically, Wayne runs the company. He's the cousin of Bruce Wayne. He's like the new boss in the building, and basically, he ends up announcing that Bruce Wayne is actually going to shut down the company if they don't make effective products, products that really are doing anything. And that basically is the concept of the show overall. So you guys can really see how different of a show this really is. But let's just get into this episode and talk about really what does work, because there definitely is stuff that works, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't. I'm going to get into all of that right now. So the cast here was something that I was definitely looking forward to. I thought we had a very good cast here for the most part. It looked like everyone was very talented, and I will definitely say that I think most of the cast did do a good job. I don't really think there's necessarily a bad performance in there. But unlike, I think, the original, concept of the show, they didn't leave much of an impression on me. However, Vanessa Hudgens did. I really love the character of Emily Locke, and not just because of the fact that Vanessa Hudgens hasn't really played a role like this before, because she hasn't really partaken in comedy, which I thought was interesting to see that she hasn't really done that kind of thing, but I definitely love seeing her as this character. I thought she did a very good job as Emily Locke. She is this new, she's now hired as the new R&D director, and what I love about her is her positivity. She thinks that they can in fact change things, and they have the threat of LexCorp on them, and she really does want to make them as good as they can possibly be. She wants to make the right kind of tech. She wants to put the company back on the map, and I really did love about her character. I thought she was very positive. You're really rooting for her throughout the show, and I thought she overall did a very good job. And there's also some great stuff going on with her character socially, because the fact that her dad always told her that you can still be super without being a superhero, and that's something that kind of has plagued Emily her entire life. She feels very normal. She feels like she doesn't really belong in this world, and that whole storyline I very much found myself compelled with. Hudgens did such a great job channeling so much emotion, but also channeling some very fun laughs, and I thought overall she was very good in the show. She by far is the best thing about the show, and it really does suck that the rest of the cast isn't nearly as good as she is. Now, the rest of the characters in the show, I don't think are bad, but they really didn't give them much to do, especially Danny Putty as Teddy, who, the original concept of the show, he was Emily's best friend. This is someone that he very much believed in. He was very proud of her. You saw that dynamic that they had, and now he's just kind of an asshole. I really was not a fan of Teddy as a character. I definitely was expecting more of an Abed type character because it just seemed like it's a no-brainer. That's the kind of the role it should give me. You know, that's what made Danny Putty such a star. And here, he's just not that great. The show really does not play to his strengths very much at all. I didn't really find most of what he said to be that funny. I thought that he was good in the show. I just didn't really find much about his character that I really did like. And a lot of the show, I just felt he was being way too hard on Emily. You know, he's blaming everything on her. He's really mad at her. You know, he feels like she doesn't know what the hell she's doing. And I get that obviously she's the new one there, but at no point does it actually seem like he cares for her. And that actually seems like, you know, she really wants her there. And it's a complete retread of what that character was originally supposed to be. And I don't know why they didn't just keep that character as her best friend. Maybe not have him work at Wayne Enterprise. Maybe just have him as her best friend. They could have done some great stuff between these two, but it's wasted. Right now, at least, it's wasted. And I was definitely disappointed because Danny Putty is such a good actor, and he really does not have that much to do in the show that I was very impressed with. And Christina Kirk, as well as Jackie, again, this is one of Emily's coworkers, and she really doesn't do a ton in this first episode. I get that obviously she has something going on with her and Van. There's definitely stuff going on with them. But her as a character, I just didn't find myself very compelled to. I didn't think that she was that great in the show. I think she could have been a lot better, and they just didn't really give her that much to do. And you can definitely tell that these characters went through, you know, were heavily rewritten, and they wanted to go in much different directions with them, but because of the fact that they changed the entire concept of the show, they then thought they had to redo their entire character, and I'm not entirely sure why they had to do that, because the perfect example of what could have been really good characters, but instead were rewritten, and the show is really lost in, you know, where they really want to go with them, at least in my opinion. However, I did really like Ron Fuchs as Ron, which this seems more like the kind of role that Danny Putty should be playing. Ron is, you know, in a world where everyone is kind of like, you know, they've matured and they just don't really appreciate these superheroes. Ron is still fanboying out about them. He's fanboying out. He finds these superheroes to be an incredible thing. There's this great scene with something going with Superman. I thought that was definitely very funny. I thought he definitely got the most laughs out of me. I thought overall he was a good character, and I like what they did with him. You know, he's actually held on to his childlike enthusiasm and the way that he reacts to things. You know, those are the ways that we react to things when we watch this movie. I thought he did a good job with that. I like Ron Fuchs in the show. I don't think he was in the original script. I believe they just kind of put him in here, and you can definitely feel like he was written in, but for what he did here, I thought he did do a good job, and everyone, I thought Ron Funches definitely did do the best out of everyone. And then Alan Tudyk in the show as Van Wayne, they try to make him this, you know, very very rich, very just stuck up, and very direct type cousin to Bruce Wayne, and it really doesn't work. I thought Alan Tudyk, he was good in this show, but he just seems like every type of, you know, annoying, sleazy, not annoying really, but just very demanding boss that we've seen on every workplace comedy. And again, it just made me think of how better this show could have been. I get that obviously they wrote Alan Tudyk in there because they wanted more star power, and they figured that, you know, if they have a good, you know, actor in there, then people want to see it, but I just didn't really find his character to be that great. I felt like they could really do a lot with his character, but they really didn't, and in general, I just found him to be quite annoying, and that's really my opinion with most of the cast. Besides Hudgens, and to an extent, Ron, they don't really do a ton with these characters. They don't really understand them very well, and it's very unfortunate because it just has made me think of how much better the show really could have been. So now let's get to the one biggest complaint I have with the show, of course, that is the directing and the writing, which, let's get to the directing because it really does hurt. I mean, it's not necessarily their fault. Like I said, they kind of had to go along with it. I'm happy that they still continued the show, but it was out of their control. You know, the head writer left the show. You know, he was the showrunner. There really was not much they could do to, you know, keep the show as what it was, and you can definitely tell that the show does not exactly know what to do now. It's very lost with what kind of show it really wants to be, and it definitely feels very very boggled down, and that was something that I was quite disappointed by, I have to say. I think the directing here, you can tell the show's really trying to find itself. It doesn't feel very confident. It doesn't really feel like it knows what it wants to be, and in general, to me, just felt like every other workplace comedy on TV. You know, it's trying to be like Silicon Valley, it's trying to be like The Office, it's trying to be like 30 Rock, and yes, those are shows that propelled NBC forward and some of their best comedies ever. I mean, 30 Rock's great, Office is great, Silicon Valley, from what I've seen, is pretty great, and obviously it's not an NBC show, but this show very much reminded me of that. And this show just doesn't have that depth. It doesn't have the characters that show had. It doesn't have the laughs. And that is my biggest problem with the show. It's not funny. It's not funny. And that's very rare for me to say with any comedy. You guys know that most times a comedy does make me laugh. I mean, there are very few times where I watch a comedy pilot and I'm like, oh, this didn't really make me laugh very much. But I laughed maybe a few times, and they really were not laughs. They're more like chuckled. I chuckled during this show, but I really didn't find it to be that funny, I have to say. Again, it very much felt like they were trying to search for the jokes, and they were really trying to figure out, okay, what's funny here? You know, what can we really do to make this funny? And most of the jokes in the show consist of them mentioning someone just to mention them because, oh, this is a DC show, we have to connect it to this character, and the show does not feel nuanced at all. The original concept sounded very nuanced. You know, they worked for these, you know, they had to clean up for these superheroes. They had to figure out what the situation was like, if this was justified, what happened. Things like that would have been very interesting, but instead they're just making tech, and, you know, they'll randomly reference Batman or Joker, and it just seems like they're name dropping these characters just because it's a DC show, and it doesn't really fit in with the show at all, I have to say. And in general, you forget the show's a DC show. You really do. I mean, yes, you have Van Wayne on here, but you really do forget that it is a DC show in the sense that it doesn't feel, and I get that it's not supposed to feel like a DC show, but if they didn't, you know, reference all this stuff, the show, it tries to do everything it can to remind you, oh, it's a DC show, it's a DC show, you know, there's Batman on the show, but you're never gonna see him, there's Joker at the end of this episode, there's very interesting things going on with him, but you're never gonna see him, and that really did piss me off, because, if you guys can't tell, I don't really care about most of these characters, I just don't. I found them all to be very annoying. I found them to be very unlikable, especially Danny Putty. I was so surprised with how unlikable